My best friend knew me better than anyone. He knew my fears, my weaknesses, and how easily I could trust. And when he, like a snake, began weaving his filthy web behind my back, I didn't even realize at first that I was caught in a trap. Think it's simple? Oh, there were twists ahead that could turn even the closest of friends into the worst of enemies. Alright, so here's the deal. My name is Alex, I'm 19, and I'm your typical college student. Yeah, the guy who falls asleep in lectures, freaks out about deadlines, and tries not to spiral into depression at family dinners, where I'm always hit with the inevitable questions like, "So, did you find a girlfriend?" Or, "When are you going to start working?" My best friend is Max, also 19, and we've been tight since back when we had no clue who Shakespeare was, or why we even had to read him. We've been through everything together. High school dramas, messy breakups, and sleepless nights before exams that always ended with the same line. That was brutal, dude, but we made it. With Max, it was kind of an unspoken bond, like a brotherhood you just can't betray. I trusted him so much that I could tell him literally anything, from my weirdest secrets to, of course, my Wi-Fi password. But a couple of days ago, something happened. I found his phone lying there, forgotten on our favorite couch. I guess Max had been in such a rush after last night's party that he just left it there. Now, any normal person would just pick up the phone and return it the next day. But I don't have normal curiosity. A thought flickered in my mind. What if there's something interesting on there? Or, maybe a secret or something. It's hard to resist the urge to peek into your best friend's phone and see what's hidden inside. And that's when I couldn't stop myself. I unlocked it, kind of by accident, and bam! I was right there in Max's messages. To be honest, I didn't expect what I was about to see. I would have preferred not to know. In those messages, Max was talking to some weird guy, and at first, I thought it was something about his new plans, or maybe some classes he was taking. But as I kept reading, I realized they were talking about me. And no, it wasn't some friendly conversation. They were discussing how to squeeze as much money as possible out of me. Seriously, it was one of those moments when you stare at the screen, unable to believe your eyes. Your best friend is actually scheming something behind your back? I sat there, reading and rereading the messages, thinking, what the actual hell, Max? Are you for real? This fire started growing in my chest, a mix of anger and, surprisingly, sadness. I mean, Max, the guy who was always there, the one I could totally be myself with, was seriously pulling me into some kind of betrayal. Okay, when I saw those messages, it hit me like a tidal wave. You know, when you catch your best friend doing something so messed up that you immediately think, no way, he wouldn't do that, right? But I decided to stay cool, trying to convince myself that it was just some misunderstanding or maybe a dumb joke that I didn't get. Like, maybe Max and that sketchy guy were just too drunk or joking around, talking about my finances. But, not exactly funny, huh? Something didn't feel right, though. I tried to act normal, like, everything's fine. But inside, the feeling of unease was building. You know when you start noticing little things that used to seem normal? I started noticing how Max was acting kind of suspicious. I might not have picked up on it before, but now, every little thing he did seemed like a sign. When he looked at me, I could see this hidden smirk in his eyes, as if he was silently saying, "Dude, you should have figured this out by now." I decided not to confront him directly. That would be way too obvious, and Max would probably just deny everything. So, I chose a different approach. Think of it as undercover agent with a psychology diploma, and just decided to watch him. As strange as it sounds, I started noticing things that I hadn't seen before. First off, his phone. Dude, it was practically glued to him. Max used to leave it lying around all the time, but now, by some magical reason, he kept it on him at all times. He'd go off into another room, whispering into it, and throw these weird looks my way when he thought I wasn't watching. And yeah, it was super suspicious. Even when I casually asked him who called, he'd start stammering and look away. I didn't know what any of it meant, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was definitely off. Look, Max and I always had a system, a shared account for all our brilliant schemes. From rent to those pointless weekly grocery hauls where we'd both try to cook at home, and then end up eating out after a day or two. The account was something we set up together, so either of us could use it freely. And of course, in a world where I still trusted our friendship, he had access to my bank account. I mean, who else but your best friend could you trust with something like that, right? Then I noticed something weird. A couple of large sums just vanished from the account. It happened midweek, one morning when I checked the balance, planning to order some food. And that's when I got this gut feeling best described as, dude, you're in trouble. I tried to calm myself, thinking, okay, maybe Max just forgot to mention something. Maybe he had some bills to cover. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that there was no honest explanation for it. We'd never spent that much on a regular day. So, I called the bank to find out where our money had gone. And you know what they told me? Those amounts had been transferred to an unknown account. Some shady, totally unfamiliar account. I could feel the blood pounding in my temples, like I was drowning in an ocean of betrayal, but in slow motion. Everything suddenly became crystal clear. Max, my brother for life, the guy I'd been through every imaginable mess with, was using me for his petty, disgusting schemes. He was taking my money, hiding behind our friendship, and apparently thought I'd never notice. But I held it together. This whole thing felt like some kind of nightmare, and I wanted to see just how far Max's betrayal actually went. All right, when I realized that this whole circus with my money had crossed every line, I decided it was time to end it. All the patience and excuses I'd been feeding myself just evaporated. I mustered up the courage and went to Max's place, like some final showdown scene in an action movie. Only instead of a weapon, I had screenshots of his messages and my bank statements. I was ready to hear the wildest excuses, expecting some pathetic attempt to justify himself, maybe even tears. Like realizing you betrayed your best friend should have some impact, right? But you know what he did? He just smirked. He looked at me with an expression like I'd just suggested watching some cheesy 90s movie. Not a shred of guilt, not even a hint of apology. He simply looked at my evidence, shrugged, and said, "Doesn't matter, dude. It's not like you're broke." What? I stood there trying to process the sheer absurdity of the moment. His eyes showed no regret, no shame. He looked at me like I was something insignificant, like a fly he could just swat away. He didn't even try to deny it. He simply claimed that this was normal for him, that nothing wrong had happened, as if taking money from a friend was as ordinary as borrowing a shirt for a night out. At that moment, I felt a wave of outrage mixed with fury. I looked at Max and couldn't believe it. Was this the person I'd shared everything with? He just calmly, without the slightest hint of remorse, threw this in my face, as if I was nothing more than a funding source for his personal budget. After that friendly conversation, where Max outright told me he saw nothing wrong with taking advantage of my trust, I completely lost it. If I'd been trying to justify his actions before, now it was clear. He genuinely saw me as some sort of sponsor for his shady dealings. So, I decided to keep an eye on him. Not in a full-on spy operation with disguises and binoculars, but I became the invisible friend who's always around but listens more than he talks. The first thing I noticed was how overly active he was with his calls. Plus, his phone was always in maximum lockdown mode. No notifications ever showed on the screen. Okay, maybe he was just paranoid. But when I started eavesdropping on his conversations, yes, judge me if you want, but I'm only human, the pieces started coming together. Max was talking to random guys I'd never even heard of, and the conversations were definitely not about plans for the evening or mundane stuff. They sounded more like deal negotiations. Then I snuck into his messages while he was in the shower. Oh, it was like a treasure trove of his ambitions and his plans to build a career, using me as his personal bank. He was promising people money from our joint account with so many details that it made my skin crawl. Dude, he seriously saw me as his private wallet for all these schemes. So my brother was making deals behind my back, planning to use me and apparently not even bothering to let me know. Each of his messages felt like a knife to the heart. He was willing to steamroll right over me to get what he wanted. My hands were shaking with anger as I read through his messages. But I knew that if I blew up now and confronted him, He'd probably just weasel his way out of it. I knew I had to come up with something smarter, something that would make sure he couldn't pull this scheme any further. But I had no idea what that would be, yet. All right, when this whole thing had gone so far, I realized that my own nerves weren't going to survive all this drama. So I gathered all of our mutual friends, the ones who knew Max and me as the inseparable duo. My plan was simple: get Max to open up in front of them, so his little manipulations would come to light. I figured that under collective pressure, he'd start making excuses, and maybe I'd finally get some sort of explanation. But Max was insanely cold-blooded. He looked me right in the eyes, completely unfazed, and calmly declared that this was one big misunderstanding. He was really trying to twist it so that I looked like the paranoid one who was just seeing things that weren't there. Dude, it was like an Oscar-worthy performance for Best Actor. Every word he spoke was delivered with the perfect dose of calm and even a hint of pity towards me. He skillfully made our friends feel that I, poor me, was just overloaded and now seeing problems that didn't actually exist. And you know what? They believed him. Seeing their sympathetic looks, the way they nodded along, I realized that all my efforts to reveal the truth were backfiring. Our friends sat there, and it really looked like they genuinely thought I'd lost it. It felt like watching a nightmare where someone had taken over my body and was saying things I'd never even thought. I stood there in the middle of the room, feeling like a complete fool. Max had made me look guilty so masterfully that I almost started doubting myself, wondering if I was exaggerating. But somewhere deep inside, I knew the truth was on my side, even if, right now, no one was willing to believe it. All right, the friendly confrontation plan was a bust. Our friends decided I was the paranoid one, while Max looked like a saint with a halo. That didn't work, so it was time for my final card. I gathered every bit of evidence I had. Screenshots of his chats, where he discussed how to borrow my money without paying it back. Bank statements showing transfers to his account. Honestly, I was ready to face whatever consequences would come from this. It was all or nothing. I sent everything to our friends, a full set of proof that left no room for doubt. Each screenshot came with a brief note. Remember what I told you? Well, here it is. I didn't leave Max even the slightest chance to talk his way out of it. The reaction didn't take long. My friends started messaging me, one after the other, each one with a mix of shock and surprise. You could say it was like a small bomb going off in our circle. My truth had finally cut through his lies, and Max was fully exposed. Now, I just had to wait for Max's reaction. When we finally met face to face, his carefree, cheerful expression, the same one he'd been lying to me with, was gone. His eyes were blazing, his jaw clenched. This wasn't my fun-loving friend anymore. This was someone cornered. Think he looked the least bit remorseful? Not a chance. His eyes were filled with cold fury, like he was blaming me for getting caught. After all this drama, Max just disappeared. No explanations, no attempts to make amends, he simply vanished. Left town like he'd never been here at all. And honestly, that was probably the easiest way out for him. To drop everything and escape from the consequences. Well, congratulations, Max. You really are a master at running away. I was left with this overwhelming sense of emptiness. Have you ever trusted someone so much that they were more than family to you? And then that person just pulls the ground out from under you? This was more than betrayal. It was like falling into a void, where you start doubting yourself and everyone around you. I lost a friend I trusted more than myself, but I gained something valuable. Experience. A harsh, bitter experience that now serves as a constant reminder never to trust anyone completely. Our friends gradually distanced themselves from the whole ordeal too. At first they were shocked by Max, but eventually everyone went back to their own lives. Nobody wanted to get dragged into a mess like this, and I get it. Nobody wants to be on a battlefield where such strong bonds are shattering. It felt like the end of an era, and yet we used to think of ourselves as practically family. I haven't seen Max since. But every time I think of him, there's still that sharp sting of betrayal somewhere inside me. It's like a small scar that will never go away. Now I know for sure, even the closest people can become your worst enemies. And the scariest part is, They know exactly where to strike to make it hurt.
My sister knew my secrets, every dark corner of my life, and she turned it all into her weapon. She built her popularity on the wreckage of my trust, thinking no one would ever find out. But every game has an ending, and my plan will make her pay in full. Ready for some real family drama? My name is Emma. I'm 20, and if I had $1 for every time someone said, "Oh, you and your sister are such best friends," I'd have bought myself an island by now. Ava, my younger sister, is 2 years younger than me, and yes, we've always been close. Close enough to share everything, from silly gossip to our deepest fears. Our late-night talks are sort of a tradition. One night, pretty late, while we were chatting in her room, Ava suddenly suggested, "Hey, let's play a trust game. Like, let's each tell one secret we've never told anyone and promise not to tell anyone else." Honestly, my first thought was that it sounded kind of childish, but this was Ava. She looked at me so seriously, like this was way more important than our usual conversations. I laughed and said something like, "All right, but only if you go first." And that's how it started. We began to play. It seemed like a simple sisterly game, nothing major. At the time, I couldn't have guessed that this little game would turn out to be much more serious than I thought. So, the game began. Naturally, Ava went first. She sat in front of me, her eyes shining as if she was about to reveal something huge. And she did. Turns out, she had a plan to get back at one of her college friends. The reason? This friend apparently hadn't invited her to some exclusive dinner. Yeah, in reality, it was a small thing. But Ava acted like this friend had committed the crime of the century. Listening to her, I thought, "All right, sis, maybe you need to reconsider your standards for friendship." But Ava was going on and on about how she'd set things up so that this friend would finally understand what it feels like to leave Ava out. I'll admit, I felt a little uneasy. Her plan was so cunning and vengeful that I was surprised my sister even had it in her to come up with all these details. But rules were rules. She'd shared her secret, and now it was my turn. I knew I'd have to reveal something big to avoid looking like a coward after her confession. So I decided to spill it. I admitted that I'd gone out with the ex-boyfriend of one of our older friends. Yes, I knew it was harsh, but at that moment, I just needed to share it with someone. And since this was a trust game, why not? Ava, of course, looked at me at first like I'd confessed to robbing a bank, but then she calmed down, and we both promised that everything said here would stay between us. Honestly, I even felt relieved. Ava swore to keep my secret, and I believed her. But that feeling lasted only until reality showed me that not all promises, especially in trust games, are worth more than just words. A couple of weeks had passed since that late-night ritual with Ava, and it seemed like life was going on as usual. Well, almost. Everything seemed normal until I noticed that people started looking at me differently. You know that look when someone sees you and sort of says hi, but does it with a face like they just swallowed a lemon? Yeah, that started happening everywhere. At first, I thought everyone was just having a bad day or maybe my hair was out of place. But then the rumors began. It started with whispers in the back rows of the lecture hall. 2 of my acquaintances were sitting behind me, whispering something, and I heard my name. Then one of my friends came up to me, lowered her eyes a bit, and muttered, I heard something about you and Tyler." Tyler, the very guy I had trusted Ava with. My friend was looking at me like she was waiting for some kind of dramatic explanation, and I was on the verge of exploding with confusion. How could anyone even know about this? Between every class, in every study group, everyone seemed to be keeping their distance from me. You know, like I was radioactive. At first, I thought maybe I had let it slip somehow myself. It's possible, right? But then it hit me. Aside from Ava, no one knew. No one. She was the only person I had confided in. The suspicions started to take root, and I felt the blood rush to my face. Ava, my sweet sister, my best friend, with her brilliant trust game idea. Looks like this game had its own hidden rules that no one had given me a chance to read. When rumors start spreading across campus and your friends start avoiding you, that's one level of trouble. But when you realize that the source of all this is your own sister, the one you shared your deepest secrets with, that's a whole other level of fun. So I went to Ava, and let me tell you, no pleasantries, no, "Hey, how's it going?" I asked her point blank. "Listen, you didn't tell anyone about this, did you?" She looked at me with such a perfectly composed expression that any director would have cried from joy. Calm, unbothered, as cool as ice in a cocktail. She didn't even blink. "Emma, come on. You know me. I didn't say a word to anyone." And here's what got to me. Her look. She was looking at me with so much confidence, like she'd known all along that I would come to her and ask. You know, like she held some kind of invisible control over me. Honestly, it made me feel a little uncomfortable, but I tried to convince myself that it was just paranoia, that I was overthinking it. After all, she's my sister, my partner in games since childhood. Could she really betray me so openly? But then the thought returned, like a refrain. What if this whole trust game was just a fake idea? A trap she needed for her own reasons. My brain was practically screaming. "Ava, could you really be playing this game so well that I didn't even realize it wasn't for both of us, but just for you?" At that moment, I decided I had to find out the truth. Just standing back and putting up with it? No, that's not me. All right, if Ava wants to play spy games, I'll give her a taste of her own medicine. It was time for my own personal investigation. I started with her phone. Don't judge me, but when your sister is throwing you under the bus in front of the entire college, privacy is the last thing on your mind. So when she left her phone on the kitchen counter, I grabbed it like it was the key to the safe holding the truth. I started scrolling through her chats with her friends, expecting, I don't know, something a little less brutal, maybe. But what I found knocked the wind out of me. They had a special chat where they talked about me. And they weren't just talking, they were fueling the rumors, adding juicy details to the story. Ava was the queen of this show, inventing new facts about my life. She was describing my secret date like it was the plot of a trashy romance novel. But that wasn't all. Turns out she was using this entire story to boost her status among our mutual friends. My secret had become her ticket to recognition and popularity. Every time she shared something about me, her friends hung on her every word, and she played the card perfectly, acting like she was worried about her poor sister. You get the picture. Hypocrisy at a pro level. Reading through those comments, I felt rage bubbling up inside me, like someone had cranked the heat all the way up. But I decided not to go off just yet. Let her think I don't know anything. I needed to see just how far she was willing to go in this game, and honestly, now I was ready to play by her rules. To be honest, I thought we'd hit rock bottom already. But as it turned out, Ava decided to dig even deeper. The following week, the rumors about me reached a whole new level of insanity. Stories were spreading around campus that not only had I gone out with our older friend's ex, but apparently I was some kind of pro at sneaky betrayal. People were saying I had even stolen money from her wallet. Your head spinning too? Mine was just on fire. One of my friends flat out told me they didn't want to talk to me anymore, because apparently I use people. And I just stood there, listening, thinking, are you guys seriously buying this garbage? My reputation on campus was plummeting like a rock off a cliff. Even those who'd been on my side before started to avoid me, casting judgmental glances. And that's when it hit me. Ava wasn't just playing around. She had planned this show from the start. Her goal was simple and terrifyingly sinister. to destroy me. Apparently, I'd become some kind of stepping stone for her on her way to stardom. The more people she could turn against me, the brighter her reputation as the sweet sister who cared about her troubled older sister seemed to become. The hypocrisy made me sick. My own sister, my best friend, or so I thought, had set her sights on me and was doing everything she could to gain her recognition at the cost of my pain. But you know what? I decided she wasn't going to get away with this. Ava may think she's won, but she has no idea what plans are brewing in my head. All right, it was time to turn this show around. I had patiently gathered my evidence, screenshots of messages where my dear sister was telling everyone what a friendly little thief I was, adding vivid details as if I were some character in a crime novel. I read how she was inventing new rumors and laughing about me with her friends, and I thought, Ava, do you even know who you're playing with? The screenshots were so intense they practically told their own story. And then the moment came. We ended up at the same party. A crowd, loud music, people ready for any drama. The perfect stage, right? I stepped to the center of the room, raised my phone, and said, Ava, ready for a little show? She froze, still trying to brush it off with, Oh, what kind of scene are you putting on here? But this time, I was one step ahead. I turned on the speaker and started reading her messages aloud. Every nasty comment, every backstabbing line. The whole room gradually went silent, everyone absorbing the unexpected climax like a scene from an action movie. Each line sounded louder than the last, and I watched Ava's face shift from, I don't care, to, what the hell is happening? When I finished, I lowered my phone and looked around. Everyone was standing there, stunned, like their world had just flipped upside down. Ava was speechless. For the first time in her career as a queen of manipulation, she had no response. I'd made sure everyone finally saw her true colors. In that moment, she realized the game was over and that there was nowhere left to hide. After that night, Ava and I, to put it mildly, stopped talking. She instantly lost all her loyal friends and her long-sought popularity. Her giggles and jokes backfired on her, and all those people she had so eagerly shared my secrets with suddenly stopped trusting her. I guess they realized that if she could betray her own sister so easily, she wouldn't hesitate to do the same to them. For me, it was a victory, but one with a bitter aftertaste. Justice had been served, but I felt empty inside. My sister, the person I had trusted without question, turned out to be someone who would tear me down just to get what she wanted. Ava tried to make me the victim, but in the end, she became one herself. Ironic, isn't it? Now I looked at the world differently. Every time someone smiled or assured me of their trust, I felt a little warning light go on in my head. The lesson had been learned harshly and irrevocably. Even the people closest to you can be your worst enemies. So if anyone ever asks me what betrayal looks like, I'll calmly answer, it has a familiar face, one you've known since childhood, and it's the face of someone you expected anything from, except a stab in the back.